The bouquet hit the ground before she even realized she had dropped it. White lilies scattered across the dusty roadside, petals bruising instantly under the weight of hurried footsteps. Someone gasped. Another person pulled back. And then, like a ripple through water, the entire street fell silent. A convoy of black cars had just stopped in front of her stall. Marathi froze. Her fingers were still curled, like she was holding something that was no longer there. Her heart thudded once, hard, as the back door of the middle car opened slowly. Men stepped out first. Tall, expressionless, watching everything. Then he came out. He didn't rush. Didn't look around. Didn't acknowledge anyone else. He stepped onto the road like he owned it. And maybe he did. Marathi swallowed. She didn't know who he was yet. But the way everyone suddenly stopped moving, the way even the loud traders across the street had gone quiet. Something about him wasn't normal. His eyes lifted and landed directly on her. Not her flowers. Her. The air shifted. Marathi forced herself to move, bending quickly to pick up the fallen lilies. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her head down. She wasn't about to stand there like a fool just because some rich man had arrived with a convoy. Careful, she muttered to herself, brushing dust off the petals. You'll ruin them. A shadow fell over her. She looked up. He was standing right in front of her now. Closer than she expected. Closer than she was comfortable with. Up close, he was worse. Not louder. Not aggressive. Just still. Controlled. Like someone who didn't need to try. His gaze didn't waver. Marathi straightened slowly, clutching the bouquet in her hands. Do you want something? She asked, her voice steady despite the way her chest tightened. Behind him, one of the men shifted, clearly shocked. Nobody spoke to him like that. But Marathi didn't know that. And even if she did, she wasn't the type to change. The man's eyes flickered just slightly. Interest. I want flowers, he said calmly. His voice was deep. Smooth. Not loud, but it carried. Marathi nodded once. Then you're in the right place. A few people nearby exchanged looks. Someone whispered. She ignored them. What kind? She asked, already turning to her stand. He didn't answer immediately. She could feel his eyes on her back. Studying. Measuring. Something that lasts, he said finally. Marathi paused. Then she reached for a set of deep red roses. These, she said, holding them out. If you take care of them. He didn't take them. Do you always speak like that to your customers? Marathi frowned slightly. I speak the truth, she replied. Flowers don't last if you don't take care of them. A faint shift in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. He took the bouquet. Their fingers brushed for a second. Marathi pulled back immediately. 3,000, she said. Another pause. Then one of his men stepped forward quickly, already pulling out money. But the man lifted his hand slightly. The man froze. He reached into his coat himself and handed her the cash. More than she asked for. Marathi looked down at it, then back at him. You gave too much. Keep it. She shook her head. I don't take what I didn't earn. This time, the silence around them felt heavier. Dangerous. One of the men behind him tensed. But the man just watched her. Longer this time. Then slowly, he took the extra money back. Marathi handed him his flowers. Thank you, she said, already turning away to arrange the rest of her stall. Just like that. No fear. No hesitation. No special treatment. Like he was just another customer. He didn't move immediately. He stood there for a moment longer, watching her as she adjusted a bunch of sunflowers, completely ignoring the fact that one of the most powerful men in the city was still standing in front of her. Then he turned, got back into his car, and the convoy drove off. The street stayed quiet for a few seconds after. Then, Marathi, she turned. Her friend Kemi rushed toward her, eyes wide. Do you even know who that was? Marathi blinked. No. Kemi grabbed her arm. That was Kang Joon-Seo. Marathi frowned. Should I know him? Kemi stared at her like she had just said something ridiculous. Only the most dangerous man in this city. Marathi pulled her arm free gently. People say that about rich men all the time. No, Marathi, Kemi said quickly, lowering her voice. Not like this. He's not just rich. He's different. Marathi shrugged slightly. He bought flowers. That's not the point. But Marathi had already turned back to her stall. The flowers needed arranging. Customers would come soon. Life didn't stop because a powerful man passed by. Or at least, it wasn't supposed to. That night, Kang Joon-Seo sat in silence. The room was dark except for the city lights filtering through the glass walls. A glass of untouched whiskey sat beside him. "Sir," one of his men said carefully, standing a few steps away. "Should we proceed with the meeting?" No response. Joon-Seo's fingers tapped lightly against the armrest. Once. Twice. Then stopped. "What's her name?" he asked. The man hesitated for half a second. "Marathi, sir." Joon-Seo's gaze didn't shift. Background. She's been running that flower stall for 3 years. No criminal record. No connections. Lives alone. Family? None nearby. Silence again. Then, who approaches her? The man blinked. "Sir." "Men," Joon-Seo said, his tone colder now. "Who approaches her?" A pause. "Several, sir. She's quite popular in that area." Something in the room changed. Subtle, but sharp. "Do they succeed?" "No, sir." "She rejects them." Another pause. Longer this time. Then Joon-Seo leaned back slightly. His expression unreadable. "Good." The man shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, should we continue monitoring?" Joon-Seo picked up the glass of whiskey, staring at the liquid for a moment before setting it down again untouched. "Yes." A beat. Discreetly. "Yes, sir." The man turned to leave. "Wait." He stopped immediately. Joon-Seo's voice dropped slightly. "Tomorrow," he said, "clear the street around her stall." The man's eyes flickered in surprise. "Clear it, sir?" No interruptions. A pause. Then a quiet, firm, "Yes, sir." The door closed. Joon-Seo sat alone again. For the first time in years, something lingered in his mind. Not a deal. Not a threat. Not an enemy. A girl. Standing in the middle of a dusty street. Telling him he paid too much for flowers. His fingers curled slightly. A faint smile touched his lips. Interesting. The next morning, Marathi arrived early. But something felt off. The street was too quiet. Too clean. Too empty. She frowned slightly as she set down her basket. Where is everyone? No loud traders. No early customers. No noise. Just silence. Then, a familiar black car pulled up. Marathi's hands stilled. And this time, she felt it. Not curiosity. Not confusion. Something else. Something heavier. The door opened, and Kang Joon-Seo stepped out again. But this time, he hadn't come just to buy flowers. Marathi straightened slowly, wiping her hands on the edge of her dress as Kang Joon-Seo approached. This time there was no crowd. No distractions. No noise to soften the weight of his presence. Just him. And her. She glanced briefly down the road again. Still empty. That wasn't normal. "You came early," she said, keeping her voice calm. His gaze moved past her stall, scanning the quiet street, then returned to her face. "I prefer quiet," he replied. Marathi raised a brow slightly. "So you cleared the whole street?" A faint pause. Not denial. Not confirmation. Just silence. That was answer enough. Marathi exhaled softly, shaking her head as she reached for a bundle of fresh daisies. "That's a bit much for flowers." "I didn't come for flowers." Her hand stopped mid-motion. There it was. Clear. Direct. She slowly placed the flowers back down. "Then what did you come for?" Joon-Seo stepped closer, closing the distance between them in a way that made the air feel tight. "You." Marathi blinked once, then let out a small, almost disbelieving laugh. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." "No," she said firmly, meeting his eyes now. "You don't." For a moment, neither of them moved. The tension stretched. Then she turned away, picking up a bouquet like the conversation was already over. "If you're not buying anything, I have work to do. You'll close early today." Her head snapped back toward him. "I will not." His expression didn't change. "It's already arranged." Marathi's chest tightened. "No," she said again, this time sharper. "You don't get to arrange my day." Joon-Seo watched her closely. "You think this is a choice?" Something in his tone made her pause. Not louder. Not aggressive. Just certain. Marathi set the bouquet down harder than she intended. "I don't know what you're used to," she said, her voice rising slightly, "but I'm not one of your employees. You don't control me." A flicker. Barely there. But something in his eyes darkened. "Everyone is controlled by something," he said quietly. "Not me." Silence fell between them again. Heavy. Then he took another step forward. Close enough now that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "You will be," he said. Marathi's breath caught for a second. Then she stepped back immediately, putting space between them. "No. It came out fast, firm, clear, and for the first time, he looked at her like she had just challenged something fundamental. I said no. Joon-Seo's jaw tightened slightly. You don't understand. I understand enough, she cut in. You're used to getting what you want. That's not my problem. The words hung in the air. Dangerous. Behind him, one of the men shifted again, clearly uneasy. But Joon-Seo didn't look away from her. Not even for a second. You should be careful, he said finally. Why? She shot back. Because you don't like hearing no? Because this world doesn't reward defiance. Marathi folded her arms. I'm not part of your world. Another pause. Then, I can change that. She laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. I don't want you to. That did it. Something snapped beneath the surface. Not loud, not explosive, but final. Joon-Seo straightened slightly, his expression returning to that cold, controlled calm. Finish your day, he said. Marathi frowned. What? You said you have work, he continued. Finish it. She stared at him, suspicious. That's it. For now. He turned, walked back toward his car, then stopped just before getting in. Without looking back, he added, this is the last day things stay the same. And then he was gone. The car pulled away. The silence lingered. Then slowly, like the world had been paused and finally hit play again. Voices returned. Distant at first. Then closer. Shops reopened. People trickled back in. Marathi stood there, unmoving. Her heart hadn't slowed. Her hands were slightly cold. Kemi rushed over again, breathless. Marathi, what happened? Why did they clear the street? What did he say to you? Marathi blinked, still staring in the direction the car had disappeared. He said, she started, then stopped. Kemi grabbed her arm. He said what? Marathi swallowed. That things won't stay the same. Kemi's face fell. That's not good. No, Marathi murmured, finally turning back to her stall. It's not. By afternoon, everything had changed. At first, it was small, subtle. A man who used to linger by her stall didn't show up. Another who always tried to flirt with her passed by without even looking. Then the regulars started acting strange. Quick purchases. Short conversations. Avoiding eye contact. Marathi noticed. Of course she did. Is something wrong? She asked one of her usual customers. The woman forced a smile. No, just busy today. But she left too quickly. Marathi watched her go, unease settling deeper in her chest. Then she noticed something else. Two men standing across the street. Not buying anything. Not talking. Just watching. Her. She turned away, pretending not to notice. But her fingers tightened around the stems she was arranging. By evening, the pattern was undeniable. Something had shifted. Not loudly. Not obviously. But completely. That night, she locked up earlier than usual. Not because she wanted to, but because there was no point staying. The street didn't feel the same anymore. The warmth was gone, replaced by something colder. Controlled. She walked home quickly, her mind racing. This is ridiculous, she muttered under her breath. He can't just walk in and... A car slowed beside her. Marathi stopped. Her body tensed instantly. The window rolled down. It wasn't him. Just one of his men. Miss Marathi, he said respectfully. We're here to ensure your safety. My safety? She repeated, disbelief sharp in her voice. Yes. I didn't ask for protection. It wasn't a request. Her stomach dropped slightly. I don't need this. The man didn't argue. Didn't push. He just said, we'll follow at a distance. Marathi shook her head, stepping back. No, you won't. She turned and kept walking. The car didn't move. For a moment. Then slowly. It followed. Not close. But close enough. Marathi clenched her jaw, her pace quickening. Her chest felt tight now. Not fear. Not exactly. But something close. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Loss of control. Across the city, Joon-Seo stood by the window again. Report. She closed early, one of his men said. Minimal interaction with customers. Surveillance is in place. And the men? No one approached her. Good. A pause. Sir, she's resisting. Joon-Seo's gaze didn't shift. I expected that. What are your next instructions? Silence. Then, remove anything that disturbs her. The man hesitated. Anything, sir? Joon-Seo finally turned. His expression calm. Cold. Anything. Back in her apartment, Marathi sat on the edge of her bed. Still. Thinking. Her phone buzzed. A message from Kemi. Are you okay? She stared at it for a moment, then typed back. I don't know. Because she didn't. Everything felt different. Like her life had quietly been taken out of her hands. And the worst part, it had only just begun. The next morning, Marathi woke up earlier than usual. Not because she had work. Because she couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long moment, staring at nothing, replaying everything from the day before. The silence. The way people avoided her. The car that followed her home. The way he said it. This is the last day things stay the same. She exhaled slowly and stood up. No, she muttered to herself. I'm not letting him do this. By the time she reached her stall, the street was already busy again. Normal. Or at least it looked normal. Vendors shouting. Customers bargaining. Cars passing. For a second, she almost felt relieved. See, she whispered. Nothing changed. But then she noticed it. People still weren't coming close. They walked past her stall like it didn't exist. Like she didn't exist. Marathi's chest tightened. A man she recognized, one who used to buy flowers every other day, walked straight past her without even a glance. Hey, she called out. You forgot your usual. He paused. For just a second. Then kept walking. Didn't turn. Didn't answer. Marathi's hand slowly dropped back to her side. That's strange, she murmured. You shouldn't call out to them. She turned sharply. Kemi stood a few steps behind her, her expression tense. Why not? Marathi asked. Kemi hesitated, then stepped closer. Because they're scared. Of what? Kemi lowered her voice. Of him. Marathi let out a short breath. This is insane. No, it's not, Kemi insisted. You don't understand the kind of man he is. Then explain it to me, Marathi snapped, frustration slipping through. Kemi looked around quickly before speaking again. People say, when he wants something, he takes it. And anyone who gets in the way, she trailed off. Marathi crossed her arms. I'm not something to take. I know that, Kemi said softly. But does he? Silence. Marathi looked away. Her jaw tightened. I'm not afraid of him. Kemi didn't respond. And somehow that made it worse. Around midday, a car pulled up again. Marathi didn't need to look to know who it was. The entire street shifted. Not silent this time, but careful, controlled. She kept arranging her flowers, pretending not to notice. The car door opened. Footsteps approached. Stopped. Right in front of her. You're working. Marathi didn't look up. Yes. A pause. I told you to close early yesterday. And I did. I didn't tell you to open today. That made her look up. Her eyes met his immediately. And I didn't ask for permission. A flicker. There it was again. That small shift in his expression when she pushed back. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said. Marathi let out a breath, shaking her head slightly. No. You are. Silence stretched between them. Then she picked up a bouquet and held it out. Are you buying something today? He didn't take it. I'm not here for flowers. Then you're wasting my time. One of his men behind him took a step forward, clearly irritated. But Joon-Seo lifted his hand slightly. The man stopped immediately. Joon-Seo's gaze didn't leave hers. Come with me. Marathi blinked. No, I'm not asking. Then you're definitely not getting an answer you like. Another pause. Longer. He studied her like he was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. You don't see what's happening, do you? Marathi's grip tightened on the bouquet. I see enough. No, you don't, he said quietly. Your world is already changing. That doesn't mean I'll follow you into yours. You don't have to follow, he replied. You just have to accept. Marathi laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Accept what? Being controlled? Watched. Decided for? Protected. Possessed, she corrected. The word landed hard. For a second, something in his eyes darkened again. But he didn't deny it. That's how you see it. That's what it is. Silence. Then he stepped closer again. Close enough that her breath hitched slightly before she steadied herself. You think anyone else can give you what I can? I don't want what you're offering. His voice dropped. You will. No, she said, her voice firm, unwavering. I won't. The tension between them felt like it could snap. People nearby pretended not to watch. But everyone was listening. Watching. Waiting. Then, sir. One of his men stepped forward quickly, whispering something in his ear. Joon-Seo's expression didn't change, but his eyes shifted slightly. Then he looked back at Marathi. This isn't over. It was never started, she replied. Another pause. Then he turned. got back into his car, and left. Marathi exhaled slowly, only realizing then that she had been holding her breath. Her hands were trembling slightly. Kemi rushed to her side again. Marathi, I'm fine, she said quickly. But her voice wasn't as steady this time. Kemi looked at her carefully. No, you're not. Marathi didn't argue. Because she wasn't. That evening, things escalated. Not subtly this time. Directly. A man approached her stall. New face. Confident. Beautiful flowers, he said, smiling. Marathi nodded politely. Thank you. And the cellar is even more beautiful. She sighed internally. I'm working. I can see that, he said, leaning slightly closer. But maybe you can take a break later. We could. He didn't finish the sentence. Because suddenly, two men appeared. Joon-Seo's men. They didn't shout. Didn't threaten loudly. They just stood there. Silent. Cold. Watching him. The man's smile faltered. He looked between them and Marathi. Then took a step back. I'll come another time. He turned and left quickly. Marathi stared after him. Her chest tightened again. Then she slowly turned to the two men. Did you just scare off my customer? No answer. Did you? One of them finally spoke. He's not allowed near you. Something inside her snapped. Not allowed, she repeated. Who decided that? Silence. You, she demanded. Or him? No response. Marathi laughed, but it was sharp, frustrated. Unbelievable. She grabbed her bag suddenly. What are you doing? Kemi asked. I'm going to end this. Marathi. I'm not living like this, she said firmly. An hour later, Marathi stood in front of a massive building. Glass. Steel. Guards. Everything about it screamed power. She took a breath. Then walked inside. The receptionist looked up, startled. Can I help you? I'm here to see Kang Joon-Seo. The woman hesitated. Do you have an appointment? No. I'm sorry, you can't. Tell him Marathi is here. The name alone changed everything. The receptionist's expression shifted instantly. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then looked back at Marathi. He'll see you. Of course he would. Moments later, Marathi stepped into his office. Large. Minimal. Cold. He stood by the window again. Like he always did. He didn't turn immediately. I was wondering how long it would take. Marathi didn't bother with greetings. You need to stop. He turned slowly. Stop what? All of it, she said, her voice tight with anger. The watching. The controlling. The scaring people away. He walked toward her. Unhurried. You came all the way here to tell me that? Yes. He stopped a few steps in front of her. And if I don't? Marathi held his gaze. Then I'll keep fighting you. A pause. Then, for the first time, he smiled. Not soft. Not kind. But something else entirely. Good. Marathi frowned. What? I don't want you to be easy, he said. Her stomach dropped slightly. Because suddenly, she understood. This wasn't discouraging him. This was feeding it. And that realization was far more dangerous than anything else. Marathi stared at him, the weight of that single word settling heavily in her chest. Good. Her voice came out lower this time. Less sharp. More cautious. Joon-Seo didn't look away. Yes. That doesn't make any sense, she said, shaking her head. You think this is a game? No. Then what is it? A process. Marathi's brows pulled together. A process of what? Breaking people? Understanding them. She let out a dry, disbelieving laugh. You don't understand people by controlling their lives. I understand what they respond to, he replied calmly. And what do you think I respond to? She shot back. A pause. Then he stepped closer again. Not aggressively, but deliberately. You respond to resistance, he said. You push back when pressured. You don't bend easily. Marathi folded her arms, unimpressed. And you think that means I'll eventually give in? I think, he said quietly, that you don't like losing. Her lips pressed together. That doesn't mean I'll lose to you. That depends on how you define losing. The room felt smaller. Tighter. Marathi exhaled sharply. This is exactly what I mean. You twist everything. I see clearly. No, she said firmly. You see what you want to see. Silence stretched between them again. Then she took a step back, creating space. I didn't come here to argue philosophy with you. Then why did you come? You know why, she said. To tell you to stop. And I told you, he replied. I won't. Her patience snapped. Why? She demanded. Why me? That question lingered. Longer than the others. For the first time, He didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted slightly, like he was considering something deeper. Then, "You're different." Marathi blinked. "That's not a reason." "It is to me." "How?" she pressed. He held her gaze. "You don't look at me like everyone else does." "And how do they look at you?" she asked. "With fear. With expectation. With need. And I don't." "No." Another pause. "You look at me like I'm just a man." Marathi tilted her head slightly. "Isn't that what you are?" Something in his expression changed again. Subtle, but real. "No," he said quietly. "Not anymore." The way he said it made something shift in her chest. Just for a second. But she pushed it away immediately. "That's not my problem. It became your problem the moment I saw you." Frustration flared again. "I didn't ask for that." "You don't have to ask. That's not how life works." "It is for me." Marathi shook her head again, stepping back further. "No," she said. "It's not. Not this time." Joon-Seo watched her carefully. "You still think you can walk away from this?" "I know I can." "Then do it." She paused. Just for a second. Then turned. Walked toward the door. Her heart beat faster with each step. But she didn't stop. Didn't hesitate. Her hand reached for the handle. And then, "Marathi." She froze. Not because of fear, but because of the way he said her name. Calm. Certain. She didn't turn around. "What?" "If you walk out that door," he said, "everything outside it will belong to me." Her fingers tightened on the handle. "What does that even mean?" "It means," he continued, "every path you take, every person you meet, every place you go, will be influenced by me." Her chest tightened. "That's not possible." "It already is." Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Marathi slowly turned back to face him. "That's not control," she said quietly. "That's obsession." He didn't deny it. "Call it what you want." "And you don't see anything wrong with that?" "No." The honesty of it hit harder than anything else. No hesitation. No shame. Just truth. Marathi swallowed. "You're not just controlling my life," she said slowly. "You're trying to take it. I'm trying to be part of it. By force? If necessary." Her jaw tightened again. "That's not how you make someone stay." "I don't need you to stay willingly," he said. That did it. Something inside her snapped completely. "Yes, you do," she shouted. "Because if I'm not there by choice, then what you have isn't real." The words echoed in the room. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he spoke again. Quieter this time. "But it will still be mine." Marathi stared at him. And for the first time, she felt it clearly. Not just frustration. Not just anger. But something deeper. Something colder. Fear. Not of what he might do in that moment, but of how far he was willing to go. She took a slow step back. Then another. "You're not hearing me," she said, her voice lower now. "I will never belong to you." A pause. Then, "We'll see." Her heart pounded. But she forced herself to turn again. This time, she didn't stop. She opened the door. Walked out. And didn't look back. The moment she stepped outside, the air felt different. Heavier. Like the world had shifted without her noticing. She walked quickly through the building, ignoring the looks from staff, ignoring the quiet whispers. By the time she got outside, her chest was tight again. Not from running. From thinking. From realizing. He wasn't bluffing. He didn't feel like someone who bluffed. And that was the problem. That night, the change became undeniable. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." Silence. Then a voice she didn't recognize. "I heard you're unavailable." Marathi frowned. "Who is this?" The line went dead. She stared at her phone. Confused. Then it buzzed again. Another unknown number. "You should be careful who you reject." Her stomach dropped slightly. Another message. And another. Different numbers. Same tone. Warning. Avoidance. Distance. Marathi sat down slowly on her bed. "What is this?" Her phone buzzed again. This time. A name. Kemi. She answered immediately. "Kemi." "Marathi." Her friend's voice came quickly, tense. "Something is wrong." "What do you mean?" "I just heard from someone people are being told to stay away from you." Marathi's grip tightened on the phone. "Told by who?" A pause. Then. "You already know." Silence filled the line. Marathi closed her eyes briefly. Her chest rose and fell slowly. "He's isolating me," she whispered. "Yes," Kemi said softly. Marathi opened her eyes again. And something in them had changed. The fear was still there. But now, there was something else too. Resolve. No, she said quietly. What? I'm not letting him do this. Marathi. I mean it, she said, sitting up straighter. If he thinks he can control everything around me, then I'll find something he can't control. And what is that? Marathi's voice steadied. Me. Across the city, Joon-Seo stood in the same place. Same window. Same silence. Update. Communication lines are shifting, one of his men reported. People are avoiding her as instructed. And her? She's resisting. A pause. Then. She will. Another pause. Sir, how far do you want this to go? Joon-Seo didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the city below. Unmoving. Uncertain to anyone watching. But inside, there was no hesitation at all. As far as it needs to. Back in her apartment, Marathi set her phone down slowly. Her heart was still racing. But her mind was clearer now. This wasn't going to stop on its own. He wasn't going to stop. Which meant she had to push harder. Because if she didn't, she already knew how this would end. And she refused to let that happen. The next morning, Marathi did something different. She didn't go straight to her flower stall. Instead, she sat in a small roadside cafe 2 streets away, watching from a distance. Her stall stood there, quiet in the early morning light. The wooden table, the buckets of roses, lilies, and sunflowers arranged neatly just the way she left them the night before. And just like she expected, a black car was already parked nearby. 2 men stood at a distance, pretending to check their phones, but their eyes kept drifting toward her stall. Watching, guarding, controlling. Marathi leaned back in her chair slowly, folding her arms. So it's true, she muttered. The waiter dropped her tea gently in front of her. You look troubled, the old man said kindly. She forced a small smile. Just thinking. He nodded and walked away. Marathi stared at the stall again. She could go there now. Open it. Pretend everything was normal. But what was the point? It wasn't hers anymore. Not really. Her phone buzzed. Kemi. Where are you? Her friend asked immediately. Nearby, Marathi replied. You're not at the stall. I know. Marathi, people are already talking. She sighed softly. They were talking anyway. Kemi hesitated. What are you going to do? Marathi took a slow sip of her tea before answering. I'm going to change the rules. What does that mean? It means I stop playing the role he created for me. Silence on the line. Then Kemi said quietly, Be careful. I will. She ended the call and stood up. Her eyes returned to the stall one last time. Then she turned and walked away. At noon, Joon-Seo received the report. She didn't open the stall today. His fingers paused on the document he was reading. Explain. She was seen nearby but left without approaching. A small silence filled the office. Where did she go? We're tracking her movements now. Joon-Seo leaned back slightly in his chair. Interesting. She's changing strategy, he murmured. Sir? She's not reacting emotionally anymore. The man nodded slowly. What are your orders? Joon-Seo stood and walked toward the window. Bring her here. Forcefully. A pause. Then. No. Another pause. Invite her. That evening, Marathi returned home tired. Not physically. Mentally. She had spent the whole day walking around, thinking, trying to figure out how to regain control of her life. The moment she stepped into her apartment building, the security guard stood up quickly. Miss Marathi. She stopped. Yes. There's a message for you. Her chest tightened slightly. From who? The guard handed her a small black envelope. No name. No stamp. Just her name written neatly. Marathi took it slowly. Thank you. She walked upstairs, her fingers tracing the edge of the envelope. Inside her apartment, she closed the door and opened it carefully. A single card. Simple. Direct. Dinner tonight. 8 p.m. You choose the location. Kang Joon-Seo. Marathi stared at it for a long moment. Then she laughed softly. He's inviting me now. Her eyes hardened slightly. At least this was different. Not orders. Not threats. An invitation. Which meant he wanted something. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Kemi. He wants to meet. The reply came instantly. Don't go. Marathi sat down slowly. He said I choose the location. Another message. That doesn't make it safe. Marathi leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Nothing about this is safe. Then she typed again. But I'm going. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then. Why? Marathi's fingers hovered over the screen. Then she replied. Because if I keep running, he keeps chasing. A pause. Another message. And if you go? Her reply was simple. Then we talk. At exactly 8 p.m., Marathi sat at a small restaurant downtown. Not fancy. Not private. Crowded enough to feel safe. She chose it on purpose. The waiter approached. Are you waiting for someone? Yes. He nodded and left. Marathi's fingers tapped lightly on the table. Her heart was steady. Her breathing controlled. But her mind was alert. Then the restaurant door opened. And everything shifted. Not because of noise, but because of presence. Joon-Seo walked in. Two men stayed outside. He came alone. Customers glanced up, curious, then returned to their meals. He walked straight to her table. Sat down. No greeting. No smile. Just calm observation. You chose well, he said. Marathi tilted her head slightly. Public places discourage bad behavior. A faint flicker in his eyes. You think I would harm you? I think you're unpredictable. I'm controlled. That's debatable. Silence. Then he looked at the menu. You ordered? No. Why? I was waiting. For permission? He asked lightly. For you, she replied. Another pause. He nodded slightly and signaled the waiter. They ordered quickly. Minimal conversation. Then silence settled between them again. Finally, Marathi spoke. Why did you invite me? He leaned back slightly. Because you stopped reacting. She frowned. That's a strange reason. You changed your behavior today. You noticed. I always notice. She sighed softly. Of course you do. He studied her face carefully. You didn't open your stall. Because it's no longer mine. It still is. No, she said quietly. It belongs to your control now. A pause. Then he said, you could have it back. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Just like that. Yes. What's the condition? He didn't hesitate. Dinner. She let out a small breath. That's manipulative. It's honest. At least you admit it. He leaned slightly forward. I prefer clarity. Marathi held his gaze. Then let's be clear. He nodded. Speak. You want me? Yes. You're controlling my life to get me. Yes. You won't stop. No. She leaned forward slightly too. And you expect me to just accept this? I expect you to understand it. She shook her head. I understand obsession. I don't accept it. Silence again. Then he asked quietly. What do you want? That question caught her off guard. What? What do you want, Marathi? She stared at him. No one had asked her that since this started. Not like this. Not seriously. She took a breath. I want my life back. You have it. No, I don't. What else? I want people to stop being afraid to talk to me. Done. She blinked. What? That's new. You gave me your time. She studied him carefully. You sound almost normal. He gave a faint, rare smile. I am normal. No, she said softly. You're not. She turned and got into the car. Because arguing anymore felt pointless. As the car drove through the city, Marathi stared out the window. Her mind was racing. This wasn't ending. It wasn't even slowing down. If anything, it was becoming deeper. More complicated. More dangerous. And the worst part, a small voice inside her whispered something she didn't want to admit. He wasn't just forcing his way into her life anymore. He was slowly making space in it. And that was far more terrifying than control. Because control could be fought. But understanding was harder to resist. The car stopped in front of Marathi's apartment building a few minutes later. She didn't move immediately. The city lights reflected faintly on the window beside her. And for a moment she just sat there, thinking about everything that had happened in the last 2 days. Joon-Seo stepped out first and walked around the car, opening her door. She looked up at him. You don't have to do that. I know. But he still held the door. Marathi stepped out slowly. The night was quiet. Too quiet. She turned to face him. You kept your word today. He tilted his head slightly. About what? The pressure, she said. People talked to me again this evening. Some even came to the stall. I told you I would remove it. Why? Because you asked. She studied his face carefully. You could have refused. Yes. But you didn't. No. Silence settled between them. Then she sighed softly. Thank you. The words surprised both of them. Joon-Seo's expression shifted slightly. You're welcome. She turned toward the building entrance, then stopped. There's something you should understand, she said without looking back. Say it. This doesn't mean I'm accepting you. I know. This doesn't mean I trust you. I know. And this definitely doesn't mean I belong to you. A pause. Then he said quietly, we'll see. She shook her head lightly and walked inside. Upstairs, Marathi leaned against her door the moment she entered her apartment. Her chest rose and fell slowly. "Why did I say thank you?" she muttered. "Because he kept his word. Because he listened. Because he didn't force her tonight. That was the problem. It was easier to fight someone who was cruel. Harder to fight someone who showed restraint." Her phone buzzed. "Kemi." "Well?" Marathi sighed and called her. "Tell me everything," Kemi said immediately. "We had dinner. And he talked. And he listened." Silence on the line. "That's worse," Kemi finally said. Marathi laughed softly. "I know. Did he threaten you?" "No." "Did he force anything?" "No." "Then what happened?" Marathi walked to the window and sat down. "He negotiated." Kemi groaned. "That's dangerous." "Yes." "What did he say?" "He said he wants me to stay the way I am. And he removed the pressure around me because I asked." Another silence. Kemi exhaled slowly. "Marathi, that's how powerful men pull people in." "I know. They don't always force. Sometimes they soften." Marathi leaned her head against the wall. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." "Are you starting to like him?" The question came too quickly. Too directly. Marathi sat up straight. "No." "Are you sure?" "Yes." A pause. Then she added quietly, "I don't like what he's doing." "That's not what I asked." Silence filled the call. Then Marathi spoke softly. "I don't know him enough to like him." Kemi sighed. "Just be careful." "I will. Because obsession doesn't always look dangerous at first." Marathi nodded even though Kemi couldn't see her. "I understand." They ended the call. But the question stayed in her mind. "Are you starting to like him?" She shook her head quickly. "No. This wasn't like. This was survival. Nothing more." Across the city, Joon-Seo sat in his office again. The same silence. The same window. "Report." "She returned home safely," his man said. "And her reaction?" "She thanked you." A faint pause. Joon-Seo's fingers stilled. "Repeat that." "She thanked you, sir." "Interesting. Anything else?" She spoke with her friend for about 15 minutes after arriving home. And conversation analysis suggests caution but reduced hostility. Joon-Seo nodded slightly. "Good. Sir, may I speak freely?" "Yes." "This situation is becoming emotional." Joon-Seo turned slowly. "It already is. That could be dangerous." "For who?" "For you, sir." A small silence. Then Joon-Seo gave a faint, cold smile. "Emotion is only dangerous when uncontrolled." "And is yours controlled?" A pause. Then, "Yes." But even he knew. That answer wasn't completely true. The next morning, Marathi returned to her stall. And this time, things felt normal again. Customers came. People smiled. Kemi helped arrange flowers. The street felt alive. Marathi exhaled in relief. "He actually did it," Kemi whispered. "Yes." "That's scary." Marathi nodded. "Yes." Because it meant something important. He could control everything. And he could also release control. Which meant everything depended on his decisions. And that was dangerous. A customer approached. A young man. Friendly smile. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Marathi replied. "I'd like some roses." She handed them to him. 3,000. He paid and smiled again. "You're very kind." "Thank you. Maybe we could talk sometime." He didn't finish. Because suddenly, a black car stopped across the street. Marathi's heart dropped slightly. The young man noticed her expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said quickly. The car door opened. Joon-Seo stepped out. He walked toward the stall calmly. The young man stiffened immediately. "Is everything okay?" he asked quietly. Marathi forced a smile. "Yes." Joon-Seo stopped in front of them. His eyes moved to the young man. Cold. Assessing. Silent. The young man swallowed. I should go." He left quickly. Marathi closed her eyes briefly. Then opened them and looked at Joon-Seo. "You said you removed the pressure." "I did." "That was pressure." He chose to leave. "You stared at him." "I was observing." She sighed heavily. "That's intimidation." "That's his perception." Frustration rose again. "You're doing it again." "No." "Yes, you are." Joon-Seo looked at her calmly. "I didn't tell him to leave." "You didn't need to." Silence. Then he said quietly, "You're upset." "Of course I am." "Because he left?" "Because you keep interfering in my life." A pause. Then he said something unexpected. "Would you have gone with him?" Marathi blinked. "What?" If he asked you out, Joon-Seo repeated calmly, would you have accepted? She stared at him. That's none of your business. It is. No, it's not. Answer the question. No. His jaw tightened slightly. Why not? Because I don't owe you answers. Silence stretched between them again. Then he spoke quietly. You would have rejected him anyway. Marathi crossed her arms. And how do you know that? Because you reject everyone. That doesn't mean I always will. That sentence hung in the air. And this time, it hit him. Something in his expression changed. Subtle, but real. Is there someone else? He asked quietly. Marathi frowned. No. Then why say that? Because my life is mine, she replied. And I decide who I let into it. A pause. Then she added firmly. Not you. The street felt tense again. Joon-Seo watched her for a long moment. Then finally spoke. I don't like uncertainty. That's your problem. No, he said calmly. It becomes yours when it involves you. Marathi felt her chest tighten again. Because his tone had changed. Not louder. Not aggressive. But colder. More serious. More possessive. And she realized something in that moment. The balance they had built last night was starting to crack. And what came after that might be worse than everything before. Marathi held his gaze, refusing to step back this time. The street was quiet again, not completely silent, but tense enough that everyone nearby pretended to focus on their own business while secretly listening. You don't like uncertainty, she repeated slowly. That doesn't mean you get to control it. Joon-Seo's expression remained calm, but his eyes had hardened slightly. I don't control everything. You try to. I manage what affects me. And I affect you, she said. Yes. The directness of his answer made her chest tighten again. You see, she said quietly. That's the problem. No, he replied. That's the reality. Marathi shook her head and turned back to her flowers, forcing herself to focus on arranging them. I have work to do. He didn't leave. Of course he didn't. You avoided my question, he said. She exhaled slowly. I ignored it on purpose. Answer it. No. A pause. Then his voice dropped slightly. Marathi. She slammed the scissors lightly on the table and turned back to him. What? If someone else enters your life. My life is not a business deal you negotiate, she cut in sharply. It becomes one when it involves me. You keep saying that like it makes sense. It does to me. She stared at him, frustration building again. You don't even hear yourself, do you? I hear myself clearly. No, she said, her voice tightening. You hear your desire and call it logic. Silence. Then he stepped closer. You think I'm irrational. I think you're used to power. That's not the same thing. It is when you use it like this. A few people nearby quickly walked away, sensing tension rising again. Joon-Seo lowered his voice. Tell me something honestly. Marathi folded her arms. What? Are you trying to push me away, or are you testing how far I'll go? The question stunned her. What kind of question is that? A clear one. I'm trying to protect myself, she replied firmly. From me. Yes. Another pause. Then he said quietly, You think I'll hurt you. I think you might destroy my freedom. Silence again. Deep and heavy. Then he said something softer than before. I don't want to destroy you. But you're already changing my life. I'm trying to be part of it. By force. If necessary. That again. Always that line. Marathi rubbed her forehead slightly. You don't even realize how exhausting this is. I do. Then stop. No. She let out a tired breath. You're impossible. Maybe. He watched her for a moment, then asked quietly, Why are you still standing here arguing with me? She frowned. What kind of question is that? You could walk away. And you'd follow. Yes. So what's the point? Exactly, he said calmly. The realization hit her again. He wasn't playing a short game. He was patient. Dangerously patient. She picked up a rose and handed it to a customer quickly, finishing the transaction before turning back to him. You're not going to leave, are you? No. Then at least stop scaring my customers. I'm standing quietly. You scare people just by existing here. That's not my intention. It's the result. He considered that for a moment, then stepped slightly to the side, giving more space between them and the stall. Better. Marathi blinked. You actually moved. You asked. That caught her off guard again. She sighed. This is confusing. What is? You forcing things one moment and adjusting the next. I adapt. That's not adaptation. That's strategy. Yes. At least he admitted it. Kemi approached quietly, handing Marathi a new bundle of flowers, then leaned closer. "He's been here for 10 minutes, she whispered. "I know. This is tense." "I know." Kemi glanced at Joon-Seo, then back at Marathi. "Be careful." Marathi nodded slightly. Kemi walked away again. Joon-Seo spoke after a moment. "She cares about you." "Yes." "She fears me." "Yes." "That's expected." Marathi looked at him. "Do you ever think about how this affects people around me?" "Yes. And I ensure they remain safe." "That's not the same as being comfortable. Comfort is secondary." She shook her head. "That's where we're different." "Yes." A short silence passed. Then he asked, "Will you have dinner with me again?" Marathi blinked. "What? Another dinner? You just had one last night. And I want another." She laughed softly. "You don't waste time." "No." She crossed her arms again. "Why?" "Because conversation brings understanding. And understanding brings what? Closeness." She stared at him. "You really say these things out loud?" "Yes." "That's bold. That's honest." She looked away for a moment, thinking. Then back at him. "I'll think about it." That was the first time she hadn't said no immediately. Joon-Seo noticed. "Thinking is acceptable. That's not a yes." "I know. But it's not a no either," he added. She sighed. "You're persistent." "Yes." "Very persistent." "Yes." She shook her head again. "You might be the most stubborn man I've ever met." "That's possible." Another customer approached quickly, bought flowers, and left just as quickly. Joon-Seo watched quietly. Then he said something unexpected. "You work hard." "Yes." "You could live comfortably." "I already do. In a small apartment." "I don't need more." "You deserve more." "I deserve peace." That made him pause. "Peace?" "Yes." "Would peace include me?" She met his eyes directly. "I don't know." The honesty in that answer surprised both of them. Joon-Seo nodded slowly. "That's fair." Another silence passed. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it briefly. His expression changed slightly. "Work." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I have to leave." Marathi nodded. "Good." A faint smile touched his lips. "You're honest too." "I try to be." He stepped back. "I'll return later." She groaned lightly. "Of course you will." He turned and walked toward his car. But before getting in, he looked back at her one more time. "Think about dinner." Then he left. The street slowly returned to normal again. Kemi rushed over. What did he want this time? Dinner again. Kemi nearly dropped the flowers in her hands. "Again?" "Yes." "And what did you say?" "I said I'll think about it." Kemi stared at her. "You what?" Marathi sighed. "I said I'll think about it." Kemi grabbed her arm. "Marathi, that's how it starts." "I know. You need to be careful." "I am." Kemi looked at her closely. "You're not softening, are you?" Marathi shook her head. "No." But deep inside, she wasn't completely sure. Because the more he stayed around her, the more complicated everything became. And complexity was always the beginning of something dangerous. Marathi worked quietly for the rest of the afternoon, but her mind refused to settle. Every flower she arranged, every customer she spoke to, every smile she forced felt slightly heavier than usual. The street was lively again, but inside her chest, tension sat like a stone. "You're thinking too much," Kemi said softly, tying a ribbon around a bouquet. Marathi didn't look up. "I know. About him." "Yes." Kemi sighed and leaned against the stall. "He's getting closer." "I know. And you're letting him." That made Marathi stop arranging the flowers. "I'm not letting him." "You didn't say no to dinner." "I said I'll think about it." "That's not the same as no." Marathi exhaled slowly and sat down. "I need to understand him." Kemi frowned. "Why?" "Because fighting someone you don't understand is dangerous." "And understanding him is safer?" "No," Marathi admitted. "But it gives me clarity." Kemi shook her head. "Just don't let clarity turn into attachment." Marathi didn't respond. Because that was exactly what she was trying to avoid. That evening, after closing the stall, Marathi walked home alone. No car followed her this time. No guards. No shadows. Just the quiet city and the sound of her footsteps. It should have felt comforting. But instead, it felt strange. Like something was missing. She stopped walking suddenly. And that realization hit her hard. "I'm getting used to him," she whispered. Her chest tightened. That was dangerous. Very dangerous. She forced herself to keep walking. Across the city, Joon-Seo sat in a private meeting room. Several men sat across from him, discussing business matters. Numbers. Deals. Territory. But his attention was divided. Sir? One of the executives looked at him. Yes. Your approval is needed here. Joon-Seo glanced at the document and signed it without hesitation. The meeting continued. But after a few minutes, one of his trusted men leaned closer. You're distracted. Joon-Seo didn't respond immediately. Continue the meeting, he said calmly. The discussion resumed. But the man didn't look convinced. After the meeting ended, he approached Joon-Seo again. This is about the girl. Joon-Seo picked up his coat. Yes. That's dangerous. Everything is dangerous. This is different. Joon-Seo looked at him. How? You're emotionally involved. A pause. Then Joon-Seo spoke calmly. I'm strategically involved. The man shook his head. No. Strategy doesn't make you stand outside a flower stall for an hour. Joon-Seo's expression didn't change. Strategy requires patience. Not this kind of patience. Silence filled the room. Then the man spoke again. You're not controlling the situation anymore. Joon-Seo turned slowly. I am. No, the man said carefully. You're adjusting to her. Another pause. Joon-Seo walked toward the door. That's called adaptation. Or attachment. Joon-Seo stopped. For just a second. Then continued walking. Prepare the car. That night, Marathi sat on her bed, staring at her phone. The screen was blank. No messages. No calls. No invitations. Nothing. She should have felt relieved. But instead, her mind replayed his words. Would peace include me? She rubbed her forehead. Why would he even ask that? Because he wanted an answer. Because he wanted space in her life. Because he wasn't going anywhere. Her phone buzzed suddenly. Her heart jumped. A message. From him. Did you think about dinner? She stared at the message for a long moment. Then typed. Yes. The reply came almost immediately. And? She hesitated. Then typed. Why do you want another dinner? 3 dots appeared. Then. Because conversation with you is different. She frowned slightly and typed back. Different how? A pause. Then. You speak honestly. She leaned back against the wall. Most people speak honestly. No, he replied. Most people speak carefully. She stared at the screen. That was true. She typed again. And what do you want from honesty? The reply came slower this time. Clarity. About what? Another pause. Then. About us. Her chest tightened slightly. There is no us. A few seconds passed. Then. Not yet. She sighed. You're persistent. Yes. She shook her head slightly. Dinner doesn't change anything. I know. Then why insist? The reply came almost instantly. Because time changes things. That sentence made her pause. Her fingers hovered over the screen. And what if it doesn't? A longer pause this time. Then I keep trying. She put the phone down for a moment. Closed her eyes. Then picked it up again. Where do you want dinner? The reply came. You choose. She thought for a few seconds. Then typed. Tomorrow. Time. 8 p.m. Location. She hesitated. Then typed. Same place. The reply came. I'll be there. She put the phone down again. Her chest felt tight. Not fear. Not exactly. Something else. Something complicated. Because this time, she wasn't pushed into dinner. She agreed. And that made everything more dangerous. Across the city, Joon-Seo looked at the message again. Tomorrow. 8 p.m. A faint smile touched his lips. Sir, his assistant asked. Yes. You look pleased. I am. Because she agreed? Yes. The assistant nodded slowly. Progress. Joon-Seo looked out the window again. Not progress. Then what? He spoke quietly. Movement. Because movement meant change. And change meant opportunity. And opportunity meant, eventually, she might stop resisting completely. Back in her apartment, Marathi lay down slowly. Her eyes stared at the ceiling. Her mind refused to rest. She whispered softly to herself. This is just a conversation. Nothing more. Just dinner. Just talking. Just understanding. But deep inside, a quiet voice kept repeating something else. Every conversation brings him closer. And she knew it. She knew it very well. Yet she still agreed. And that decision was slowly pulling her deeper into his world. The next day moved slower than usual for Marathi. From the moment she woke up, she was aware of the decision she had made the night before. It sat quietly in her mind like a ticking clock, reminding her that by 8 p.m. she would be sitting across from him again. Not forced, not pressured, by choice. That alone made her uneasy. She got dressed, tied her hair back, and stepped outside with her flower baskets. The morning air was cool, and the street was already waking up with vendors and commuters moving about. Kemi was already at the stall. "You look like you didn't sleep," Kemi said immediately. "I slept. You thought all night." Marathi placed the flowers down. "Yes." Kemi folded her arms. "And I agreed to dinner." Kemi closed her eyes slowly. "I knew it. It's just dinner. That's what you said last time." Marathi sighed. "I need to understand what he really wants." Kemi shook her head. "He wants you. I know that. Then what is there to understand?" Marathi looked at her seriously. "I want to know if there's a limit to his obsession." Kemi stared at her. "And if there isn't?" Marathi didn't answer immediately. Then she said quietly, "Then I need to know how to protect myself." Kemi exhaled slowly. "You're walking into a fire to study the heat." "Yes. That's dangerous." "I know." Kemi grabbed her hand gently. "Just promise me something." "What?" "If he ever crosses a line, you walk away immediately." Marathi nodded. "I promise," even though she wasn't completely sure she could. Across the city, Joon-Seo prepared for the evening. His assistant stood beside him in the office. "Car is ready for tonight, sir." "Good. Security?" "Minimal." The assistant frowned. "Sir, that may not be safe. She dislikes visible control." "And your safety?" Joon-Seo buttoned his cuff calmly. "She is not a threat." "That's not what I meant." "I know." He walked toward the window. "Tonight is conversation, not intimidation." The assistant nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." Then added carefully, "You seem different." Joon-Seo glanced at him. "How?" "You're planning around her comfort." "That's necessary." "For business, yes. For personal matters, it's unusual." Joon-Seo didn't respond, because even he knew that was true. By evening, Marathi closed the stall early. Kemi stood beside her, watching closely. "Are you sure you want to go?" "Yes. Last chance to cancel." "I know." Kemi handed her a small pepper spray. "Take this." Marathi blinked. "Kemi, take it." She sighed and slipped it into her bag. "Okay." Kemi hugged her tightly. "Call me after." "I will." "Immediately." "Yes." Then Marathi walked away. Her steps were steady, but her heart wasn't. At exactly 8 p.m., she arrived at the restaurant. Joon-Seo was already there, waiting. He stood when he saw her. "You came." "Yes." "You look tired." "I worked all day." He pulled the chair for her. She sat. This time, the tension felt slightly different. Not lighter, but more familiar. "What would you like to eat?" he asked. "Anything simple." He ordered quietly. Then they sat in silence for a few seconds. Finally, Marathi spoke. "I want to ask something today." "Ask." No deflection. "Agreed." She leaned forward slightly. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you are different." "That's not enough." "It is for me." "No," she said calmly. "Explain it properly." He watched her for a moment, then spoke slowly. "Most people want something from me. And I don't." "Yes. That's attraction, not obsession." "It started as attraction. And now it's something else." She held his gaze. "What exactly?" He answered quietly. "Need." That word made her heart skip slightly. Need is dangerous. "Yes. You shouldn't need someone you barely know. Needs don't ask permission." She leaned back slightly. "You're aware this isn't healthy?" "Yes." "And you're okay with that?" "Yes." She shook her head. "That's not normal. Normal is irrelevant." "No, it's not." "Yes, it is," he said calmly. "Because I don't live a normal life." Silence followed. Then she asked another question. "Have you ever loved someone before?" He paused. A rare pause. "Yes." The answer surprised her. "What happened?" "She died." The air went still. "I'm sorry." He nodded slightly. "It was years ago." "Did you love her like this?" "No." The answer came quickly. She frowned. "No. No." "Then what is this?" He looked directly at her. "Stronger." That made her uneasy. Stronger isn't always better. "I know. Sometimes stronger becomes dangerous." "Yes." "And you still want it?" "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "You don't see any problem with this?" "I see the problem. And I accept it." That kind of honesty made her uncomfortable. Because he wasn't pretending. He wasn't hiding. He was fully aware of what he was doing. and still choosing it. The food arrived. They ate quietly for a few minutes. Then she asked another question. What if I never return your feelings? He looked up at her calmly. Then I continue. For how long? As long as necessary. That could be forever. Yes. You'd chase someone forever? If it's you. Her chest tightened again. You realize that sounds like a threat. It's not. It feels like one. He put his fork down. I won't hurt you. That's not what I'm afraid of. Then what? She looked at him seriously. I'm afraid you'll never let me go. Silence filled the table. Then he spoke quietly. Probably not. Her breath caught slightly. You're honest to a fault. Yes. That's terrifying. Honesty usually is. She rubbed her temples slightly. This is overwhelming. I know. Then why keep pushing it on me? Because I want you to understand me. And after understanding? Choice. She looked at him carefully. Choice. Yes. You're giving me a choice? Yes. That's new. You always had one. No, she said firmly. Now I'm starting to feel like I do. A small silence followed. Then he nodded. Good. That surprised her. You want me to feel like I have a choice? Yes. Even if I choose no? He paused for a moment. Then answered quietly. Yes. She studied his face carefully. Trying to see if he meant it. Trying to see if it was real. Trying to see if it was another strategy. But his expression remained calm and unreadable. And for the first time, she felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. Not pressure. But uncertainty. Because if he truly meant that, then this wasn't just obsession anymore. It was becoming something deeper. Something harder to fight. And that realization made her heart beat faster. Because the more human he became, the harder it would be to keep him out of her life. Marathi sat quietly across from him, her fingers wrapped around the glass of water in front of her. The restaurant was calm, the soft sound of cutlery and quiet conversations blending into the background, but inside her chest, everything felt loud. You said I have a choice, she said slowly. Yes. And you mean that? Yes. She studied his face carefully. No tricks. No tricks. No hidden pressure. No. She leaned back slightly. Then I want to be honest. I prefer honesty. Marathi took a slow breath. I don't hate you. Joon-Seo's expression shifted slightly. But I'm afraid of you, she continued. That's understandable. I'm afraid of what your world can do to my life. He nodded. That fear is valid. And I'm afraid of your obsession. Silence. Then he said quietly. That is also valid. She looked down at the table. You are powerful, Joon-Seo. Too powerful. Yes. And people like you don't fall in love normally. No. They consume people. A pause. Then he spoke softly. Sometimes. She lifted her eyes to him. And I don't want to be consumed. I don't want to consume you. But you want to keep me. Yes. She shook her head slowly. That's the problem. Explain. You want me in your life permanently. Yes. And I'm still trying to understand if I even want you in my life at all. Silence stretched between them. Then he nodded. That's fair. She blinked slightly. You keep saying that. Because it is. Marathi leaned forward slightly. So listen to me carefully. I'm listening. I'm not ready for a relationship with you. I know. I'm not ready to be part of your world. I know. And I'm not ready to belong to anyone. His jaw tightened slightly at that last sentence, but he remained calm. Understood. She continued. But I am willing to keep talking to you. That made him look at her again. Talking. Yes. Nothing more. For now. Silence. Then he asked quietly. Why? She thought for a moment before answering. Because you're trying. That answer surprised him. You are trying to listen. Yes. You are trying to give me space. Yes. You are trying not to force me. Yes. She nodded. And that matters. A slow silence followed. Then he spoke. So this is your decision. Yes. We continue talking. Yes. No ownership. Yes. No pressure. Yes. He leaned back slightly. And time will decide the rest. Yes. For a long moment he just watched her. Then he nodded. Accepted. That word carried weight. Real weight. Not a negotiation. Not a compromise forced by power. But acceptance. Marathi felt her chest loosen slightly. Thank you. You're welcome. They continued eating quietly for a few minutes. Then he spoke again. I want to ask one last question. What? Are you still afraid of me? She thought carefully. Then answered honestly. Yes. He nodded. Good. She frowned. Good. Yes. Why? Fear keeps you cautious. That's not comforting. It protects you. She sighed. You're strange. Yes. They both smiled faintly. A small, rare moment of calm. After dinner, he walked her outside again. The night air was cool and quiet. The car waited at the curb. He opened the door for her. She stopped before getting in. You really meant what you said? Yes. You'll give me time. Yes. No pressure. Yes. She nodded slowly. Then I'll keep talking to you. He gave a slight nod. And I'll keep trying. She stepped into the car. This time, the silence between them felt different. Not tense. Not heavy. Just uncertain. But peaceful. When they arrived at her apartment, she stepped out and turned to him. Good night, Joon-Seo. Good night, Marathi. She started walking toward the building, then stopped and looked back. He was still standing by the car, watching her. Not in a controlling way. Not in a threatening way. Just watching. She gave a small wave. He nodded slightly. Then she walked inside. Upstairs, Marathi sat on her bed and exhaled deeply. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Kemi. Well? Marathi laughed softly and called her. So, we talked. And he agreed to give me time. Silence. Really? Yes. No pressure. Yes. No control. Yes. Kemi sighed in relief. That's good. Yes. But, Marathi smiled slightly. You know me too well. What is it? I still don't know where this will go. That's normal. Yes. But for now, I think it's okay. Kemi nodded on the other end. Just take it slow. I will. And keep your heart safe. Marathi smiled softly. I will. They ended the call. Marathi lay down slowly and stared at the ceiling. Her life had changed in ways she never expected. A powerful Korean billionaire. A dangerous world. An obsession that refused to disappear. And a connection that was slowly forming despite her resistance. She whispered quietly to herself. Let's see where this goes. Across the city, Joon-Seo stood by the window of his penthouse again, looking at the city lights, thinking about her words. We continued talking. A slow, calm breath left his chest. Progress. Not possession. Not control. But progress. And for the first time in a long time, he was willing to wait. Because some things couldn't be forced. Some things had to grow slowly. And if patience was the price of having her in his life, he was ready to pay it. If you enjoyed this story and want more emotional, intense mafia romance stories like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us what you think about Marathi and Joon-Seo. Would you have accepted him, or would you have walked away? Your comments help us create more powerful stories like this. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss the next thrilling story. And until the next story, stay safe, stay inspired, and keep believing that love can appear in the most unexpected places.